Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome back. I'm Frank Agin, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host of this episode of Networking RX. Thanks again for listening, subscribing, and referring others, and certainly thanks for the comments and questions you've sent in. Once again, those comments and questions prove to be an indication that we need to explore in more detail some of the things we've talked about in earlier episodes. I'm certainly sorry that I've assumed too much or explained too little, but it's all good, right? The nature of a podcast, in a sense, is like an extended conversation that's slightly out of step with real time, and that's okay. As when it comes to learning about networking, it's less important as to when the learning comes, just as long as the learning does come. At any rate, the comments / questions / suggestions relate to my brief commentary in episode 1 on social capital. More or less, it seems that there is at least a hope that I'll touch on the notion of social capital more deeply. So let's dig into that. As a refresher, in episode 1, I indicated that we have in our lives 3 types of capital: physical capital, human capital, and social capital. To explain, physical capital are those things we own, such as money, stocks, bonds, and cars. Human capital is our ability to produce for our clients, our employees, our employers, ourselves, which is directly related to our education, accreditation, and experience. Physical capital and human capital are simple enough, right? What about social capital? What is it? Simply stated, social capital is the end result of your networking efforts. In short, our social capital is an approximate valuation, not necessarily in dollars and cents, as to how those we interact with enhance our lives, both personally and professionally. It's our ability to use our networks to get information, new clients, and another job. So here's an interesting question, one that you've probably never considered. How much social capital do I have? Think about it. When I pose this question to audiences and workshop participants, I get a lot of blank stares. For the most part, they've never thought of it before. Generally speaking, they're not comfortable thinking about how much social capital they have. They'll tend to push back with things like, does it really matter how much social capital I have? After all, they'll reason that their social capital is what it is, and knowing its value is not going to change that. They'll also push back, arguing that determining our social capital would be a complicated task, so why bother? But here's the deal. We carefully account for our physical capital, don't we? We have deeds to our homes, titles to our cars, we carefully track our investments, and some of us religiously balance our bank accounts. I'm not one of them, however. Thankfully, my wife is awesome at that, amongst many other things. But we also account for our human capital. Our resume carefully details where we've been and what we've been doing. Our office walls are lined with diplomas and certificates that serve as a proof of our accomplishments. And we take every reasonable opportunity in promoting ourselves to reiterate all the wonderful things we've done. So does knowing how much social capital we have matter? Arguably it does. I think it does. We measure our physical capital, we measure our human capital. Why not our social capital? Again, people will argue, but it would be so complicated to assess our social capital. Perhaps that's true. Keeping track of our physical capital is not always easy either. But that hasn't stopped many of us from undertaking reasonably decent accounting, especially whenever we're applying for a loan. Additionally, accounting for human capital is not a walk in the park. I mean, how do you put a value on your education experience? But that doesn't stop you from making a ballpark assessment of it. And if you don't think you do, then think back to the last time you determined the value of your services or walked into your boss's office looking for a raise. So the fact that it might be complicated to assess your social capital should not stop you from doing it, or at least thinking about it. As for the argument that my social capital is what it is and knowing its value won't change it, really? I have to chuckle whenever someone asserts that the value of their social capital is static, as if it's preordained at birth. I hope you're not one of them. After all, on a daily basis, the value of our physical capital holdings hopefully grows and we certainly endeavor to pay down debt periodically. Likewise, while our formal education might be static at this point, unless you're enrolled in school, with every passing moment we gain more experience, and with every book or article we read, or seminar we attend, or podcast we listen to, our knowledge and insight grows. So it stands to reason that the value of our network is constantly changing, arguably increasing. Thus, it can't hurt to have a sense as to the value of our network, even a vague understanding. After all, you can't improve something, and probably won't improve something, unless you measure it. Now, if you're super enterprising, you can undertake a very complicated assessment of your social capital. As over the years, social scientists have developed and refined methods for determining how much social capital you have. In fact, if you get Dr. Wayne Baker's book, Achieving Success Through Social Capital, he provides insights on some rather involved computations. While it's good to know that these rather scientific formulas exist, I'm not sure they're necessary for our purposes. To be honest, I read this book, examined the formula, and then I moved on to the next chapter without picking up a pencil. In fact, to get a general understanding of how much social capital you have, you don't need to be scientifically precise. You can do this by simply reviewing your network in 3 basic ways, and from that you have a general idea of the value of your network. Moreover, you can set about intentionally improving the value of your network over time with that information. Here's a way to go about it. Note I said a way to go about it, not the way to go about it. Once you hear this, you might have your own twist on social capital computation. As long as you're consistent in your computation, you'll be comparing apples to apples over time. At any rate, there are 3 assessments. First assessment: who do you know? What I mean by that is not necessarily who are each individual you know, but rather how many people do you know? I find that a good starting point for this is to look at the people with whom I've taken the time to enter into my electronic database. I use Outlook, and it gives me the raw number. Now I admit that that's not a perfect measure, but I don't enter everybody I meet in that database. I generally only include those that I'm likely to have an ongoing relationship with. So I don't have every member of AM Spirit Business Connection in there, but I have members within the organization that I interact with on a reasonably periodic basis. So as a baseline, give yourself a point for every person in your database. And again, this is not perfect, nothing is, but it's a means of assessment. So again, the first assessment is who do you know? The second assessment, address this question: of the people you know, how many know each other? Why is this important? If most people you know have a connection with everyone else you know, your network is dense and your social capital is limited. However, you have an abundant social capital if you have a diverse network, i.e., individuals are relatively independent of one another. Years ago, when I started in the private practice of law, I went back to network with my former co-workers at Coopers & Lybrand, the accounting firm where I was a tax consultant. And I asked who they could refer me to so I could build a clientele. The funny and sad thing was that most of my network there knew each other. Bob directed me to Susan, and Susan directed me to Bob. It wasn't quite this bad. Nevertheless, this initiative didn't go nearly as far as I would have hoped. Oh well, I persevered and moved on. But you can see the problem. I had a network with my first job where everybody knew everybody. And so I didn't have as much social capital as I thought I might. So to assess the relative density of your network, do this. Again, this is not a perfect measure, but it'll give you a sense. At any rate, export your electronic database into a spreadsheet, listing your contacts down a column. Remember, you get a point for each contact on the list. Indicate that on the left of the name in a new column. Now in a third column, score the contact according to this guideline. Give them a 1 if there's someone who is connected to, say, 25% or more of your contacts. Give them a 2 if there's someone who's connected to less than 25% of your other contacts, but more than 10% of your other contacts. And then give them a 3 if there's someone who's connected to less than 10% of your other contacts. Again, these ranges aren't set in stone. Adjust them based on your own situation. You might opt for different ones. It doesn't matter. What matters is consistency. That is, use the same range from measure to measure as you'll want to use this to help you improve. Okay, first two assessments. One, who do you know? Second assessment, of the people you know, how many know each other? Okay, third assessment, final assessment. Answer this. Of the people with whom you network, whom do they know that you might not? That is the measure of the potential of your network. Think about it. If your network is comprised of individuals with few useful contacts, your network must be tremendously broad to provide you with any significant social capital. On the other hand, you only need to know a handful of highly networked people to provide you with a wealth of social capital. No doubt, every connection has value and every contact has opportunity, but this exercise is about measuring the overall value of your social capital. So we need to draw a distinction between people. To assess the relative potential of your network, do this to the spreadsheet of exported electronic contacts you have. Remember, they get a point just for being a contact, and then another 1, 2, or 3 points depending upon their connectiveness to other contacts. Now in a fourth column, score the contact according to this guideline. Give them a 1 if you view them as having a subpar number of and/or quality of people in their network that you'd like to meet in time. Give them a 2 if you view them as having an average number or average quality of people in their network that you'd like to meet in time. Finally, give them a 3 if there's someone who you view as having a broad, diverse, and high quality network of people you'd like to meet in time. In doing this, go with what you know. If you know nothing about them, assume the worst and give them a 1. Or you might think someone is a 2 and later learn they're a 3. That's fine. This measure is not static, and again what matters is consistency from measure to measure, because this will help you improve. At this point, every one of your contacts has a score from 3 to 7. Moreover, you can add up all your contacts to generate a composite social capital score. With this measure in hand, you can set about working to improve your overall social capital score. For example, you can work to meet other people, and you can ensure that you're meeting a better type of person. Perhaps someone who is relatively unconnected to those that you know. Perhaps people who have a strong network of people you'd like to get at. And you can work to coach the 3s in your network. You know, those who are very connected to others in your network and who don't have much of a network themselves. You can coach them to improve the mix and potential of your network by helping them develop their network. Again, this is just one idea on how to measure your social capital. You might opt to change this. You might opt to include other assessments. The point to all of this is that we need to view our network as more than just people with whom we interact. We need to view it for what it is. It's an asset, and every contact you have contributes to the growth of that asset. The first step to truly appreciating this asset, however, is having a basic understanding of how much value it brings to you. This is important to you, so I encourage you to think about this as you move about your day. As a reminder, AmSpirit Business Connections is looking to grow its team, and it might just be a great opportunity for you, so please take note. We're looking to add franchisees to our system. What does this entail? AmSpirit Business Connection franchisees help entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area connect, exchange quality referrals, and become more successful. They do this through a structured weekly morning meeting. Because these meetings are in the morning, generally wrapping up by 9 a.m., a successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. You see, all AmSpirit Business Connections franchisees have added this opportunity on what they're already doing. For a couple hours in the morning, a few days a week, our franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're entrepreneurs and professionals such as attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. Here's the neat thing. Not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating AmSpirit Business Connections, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business focus as well. So if you or someone you know would like to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connection franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.